Katherine Bryan and welcome to Boehm number 15. I'm going to talk you through some ideas and tips that I have for this study. So hopefully this can help you with your practice and help you with your ultimate goal to be able to play this as well as you possibly can. So when I approach any study, the first thing I will do is identify the challenges that study present. So not only what are the challenges, but let's think positive. What am I going to be able to do better once I have learnt this study? Because we're improving these technical issues, not just for this study, but for any time that any of these issues come up in any piece that we play. So with this particular study, my number one challenge would be articulation. So in this study, we've got a mixture of staccatos, we've got slurs of all different lengths, pairs, long slurs. So we really want to aim for as much clarity and detail as possible with all of that articulation. I'm going to come back to that because it's quite a big issue and there's some techniques that you can use to practice that, but we'll go through identifying all these challenges first. The second challenge in this study, one of my pet hates, trills. I hate trills. It's so tricky to get them as crisp and as crystal clear as possible. And in a study like this, which is moving really quickly, we have to be super on it with the trills. We've got to get them really, really tight. So there are different ways you can practice your trills. I think the best thing to do is do some measured practice. So you can put a metronome on if you want to give you real security, but start by playing the trill extremely slowly. So I'll take the first trill, which is a B to C sharp, which I think in this study it's really important that we finger out. Studies are kind of like workouts for us in every sense. So we want to almost use the trickiest way possible to do our trills. So B to C sharp. It's a tricky one because we're moving first finger and thumb and they have to be moving exactly together. So I want to start by doing these measured trills. So it really is a case of very, very organised practice. What's most important when you're doing this kind of practice is awareness of what your fingers are doing. So I need you to lock your brain right into your fingers. Don't be mindless when you're doing this practice and kind of put on the TV. Try and really lock in to what your fingers, how your fingers are moving. Almost look down on your fingers. So are they moving too high? Are they hitting the keys? Are your fingers tense? We don't want any of those things. We want a mechanical movement that's very precise, but isn't using up lots of energy by moving too much. And that applies to all of the trills right through this study because we have a very, very short amount of time to play them. So you can use these little measured practice times to get them as secure and as even as possible. I think also just bear in mind what your sound is doing through these trills. Is it even? Are you blowing through the trill? Don't try and kind of make the sound too busy by adding any vibrato. Just nice and secure with the sound. Also bear in mind that your other fingers that aren't trilling, what are they doing? Are they kind of having a little chill out here? We don't want that. We want them to be really close to the keys, not tight. Analyze tension right through your body when you're playing, even if your toes are tight. We don't want that. We just want everything to be nice and relaxed, and that will give you the easiest possible way of doing everything to the best of your ability. Okay, back to our challenges. So I think for me, the third challenge would be breathing in this study. It's a challenge in every study, breathing, because these studies are fast moving. We're going through at quite a pace. So we need to be really sure that we're breathing as quickly as we can. You don't want to be taking hours to breathe because that's not challenging you. But at the same time, we need the breaths to be what I would call a healthy breath. So nice and open. Keep your throat nice and open, nice and low in the body so they're not up here. You're not tensing anything as you breathe. Try and get a way of getting those breaths as full as possible, but also as quick as possible. And you can practice the breaths on their own. You don't have to always kind of do your breathing practice within context. I would just practice even just doing like that. We kind of often do longer breathing practice. We breathe in for long, long counts and out for long counts. We need to also practice our short breathing to check that we can keep that as healthy as we do when we're playing, when we're breathing for a long period of time. So with the breathing, I would suggest in a study that you mark in where you want to breathe. This won't happen instantly. You need to play it and get used to the study first and find out what's best for you. And again, challenge yourself. So don't put in breaths every bar or two. See how long you can go without breathing and still play in a quality way. We need the breaths to make musical sense as well. So make sure that you're not breathing in the middle of a phrase or you're breathing in the middle of a slur. Try and be really musically minded with where these breaths are coming. Okay, so we've identified some challenges, and they're just a few examples. There are so many things you can identify in a study that you need to focus in on. Obviously always sound, so that goes without saying that we want the best possible sound. But as well as identifying challenges, I'd really like you to identify goals, and goals that are more specific than just I need to be able to play this study. Because for me, you need to approach a study as you would any piece of music. Yes, it's identifying technical difficulties and technical issues, but at the end of the day, you need to make music. So that is your number one goal, to use all these technical tips and technical exercises to create something that in a sort of a platform that enables you to be creative with your study. We aren't machines, so anything that you produce has to be communicating something. If you think about an actor, when they're learning their lines for a play, for example, they won't sit at home reading their lines in a monotone voice like this until they learn the words. They will be putting expression into their lines immediately. So we want to do the same with our music. There's kind of no excuse for being robotic. Always be expressive with your playing, even when you're working on technical issues. I think that it's very, very important to think about what the character of your study is, what you want it to be, what do you want to say with it. So with number 15, I would say that it's quite bright. The tempo gives you that indication because it's allegro. So choose a tempo that reflects the character but also pushes you technically. So you don't want to take something that's too slow. It needs to have some brightness to it to give that energy that we want in this study. The key signature can also give you a clue to the character. So here we're in, not my favourite key signature, B major. It's, a lot of sharps there. But B major for me is quite a sort of joyful key. So we need that character coming into your sound and the way that you articulate. And there's, as we mentioned before, tons of articulation. So keep that brightness in the staccatos to reflect this kind of more energetic character that we're aiming for here. Another goal, obviously, is stamina. So we want to be able to play this piece from start to finish, maintaining the quality in the very last bar that you have in the very first bar. And I know myself from playing studies, I start with the best intentions of crisp articulation and short staccatos, and by the end I'm sort of a heap on the floor. So keep reminding yourself of these technical things as you're going through. Is my staccato nice and short? Am I blowing through the slur? So that you really bring as much detail as you can. One thing that really helps me with a study, getting the detail and figuring out what I want to do with it, is starting by playing it really slowly. So that gives you an idea of also how you're pitching the notes. With this study, I find the intervals tricky. We want to try and avoid cracking notes. We crack notes often because we have tension creeping in and the shape of our blowing hole doesn't match the amount of air we're putting through. These notes, particularly in bar 1 and 2, are prime crack notes. So that kind of thing. So practicing it slowly allows you to give the space that you need in your throat and figure out where you're kind of pitching the note internally. Notes don't just kind of get thrown out of our embouchure. They're physical things that we have a different internal shape for each one. Intervals as well. We need to preempt an interval coming. So if you've got a big interval, know that in the note you're on, the next note needs to be prepared. So I'm ready for the B on the D sharp. They sound like very, very small details, these, but it's so important for the flow of the study that we really focus in on where every note is going to sit. So, articulation tips, because this piece is full of little staccatos and they come usually after you've slurred something. So it's important to try and differentiate as much as possible between that lovely link in the slur and then the shortness and bounciness of the articulation. The bounciness comes from down here. So we need to get our air nice and low when we breathe so that you engage your support, and that can give the staccato notes the bounce that they need. I'm going to just show you a little bit on the last line here. So that's with the tongue, but you can also practice it without the tongue. So we still have that energy. The note really shouldn't sound that different because the majority of what's giving the note its life is here. The tongue just gives it the precision. And again, don't feel you have to stick to exactly just what's on the page. You can go off-piste a little bit and do a bit of... So just some little sequences with diaphragm only, just getting it working. Don't just do it in forte either. It's very, very tempting to play this huge sound on diaphragm only. Also do some soft ones. Because we want to be able to maintain life even when we're playing softly, not just in the louder passages. With slurs too, we want to get the best possible quality when we're playing either a long slur or a pair of slurs. Let's have a look at a long slur. So we're kind of on line 5 here. Really kind of blow right through that slur as if you're playing one long note. Keep the fingers really even, but just keep that air going so we're not kind of getting a disjointed effect. We don't want anything too bumpy. When you're looking at pairs of slurs as well, we really need the precision on those pairs. So again, I'm going to slow it down. So if anything, the second note should be slightly lifted. Ta-dum, pee-dum, pa-dum. It just gives a really nice effect when you speed it up. Of a kind of more alive feeling, more energetic feeling on those slurs rather than... which sounds a little bit too kind of monotone for the character that I think this study should have. The final thing I want to say is that, you know, studies have a bad reputation of being kind of sort of a slog and technical and, you know, a little bit dull sometimes. So my top tip really is have fun with this study, with any of your studies. And that may mean that you actually go through and you put in some extra dynamic markings or colour changes. That's absolutely fine because you want to follow the shape of the phrase and really make music from this study. Boehm's given you a few things, but actually very, very minimal, really. And for example, it's marked forte at the beginning, and then we have nothing until actually another forte on sort of line 8. So there's no way that we would keep it that dynamic right the way through with no change. So let's find some places to bring the dynamic down a little bit, change the colour, give a little bit more, maybe a couple of echoes. You could find some places where we can do some echoes, just to give it as much kind of fizziness as possible. And I think as a player, that gives you more to grasp onto when you're playing it, and it's then much more satisfying for you. Have fun with the slurs. It's such a quirky study in terms of where the slurs are. For example, even in bar 3, we've got them split into 3 groups of 4, even though the piece is in 6/8, so we'd feel it normally in 2. I think bring out the slurs. So there's quite a few places where you can do that in this study. Make a real feature of where the beat is slightly displaced. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video about Boehm's Caprice number 15. Good luck with your practice and have fun.